we've talked about how payroll taxes and subsidies and how they both affect equilibrium using the model of supply and demand to understand how this happens. Now we're going to explore another type of government intervention, mandated benefits. Mandated benefits are perks or protections that employers are legally required to provide their employees beyond wages. These typically include things like health insurance, retirement contributions, paid leave like vacation, sick leave or parental leave, and workers' compensation. Governments require these benefits in part to ensure that workers have access to important protections and important services that might not be provided in a fully competitive labor market. The idea is that without these mandates, some workers might not receive the benefits essential for their well-being, things like health coverage, that can lead to broader societal issues. Now, the economist Thomas Sowell likes to say there are no solutions, only trade-offs. Just like with taxes, these mandates impact the labor market by influencing both employers' hiring decisions and workers' willingness to work. While these mandates may be good or be for good things, they also distort the labor market in interesting ways, which are worth exploring. So let's dive into how these benefits affect the supply and demand for labor. We can use the model of supply and demand to understand how this happens and analyze how changes in costs or incentives impact both sides. For example, when a benefit like health insurance is mandated, it increases the total cost for firms to hire workers because they now have to provide this benefit in addition to wages. The supply and demand model lets us visualize how this cost might lead to a shift in the labor demand curve, potentially reducing the number of workers that firms are willing to hire at the same wage. On the supply side, workers might value the benefit, so they might be willing to accept slightly lower wages in exchange for its compensation. On human resources, you may have some decision-making over what benefit your firm offers above and beyond what is required. What is great about this sort of analysis is that you can apply these concepts to other types of benefits. So let's think of a specific example of a fake mandated benefit, like a requirement for each company to serve freshly brewed coffee for each worker. The figure on the left shows the market initially in equilibrium at employment level E0. Let's suppose that the cost of coffee for the week per employee is $C per worker. So what's going to happen? Well, the coffee is a cost of C, which is the same effect as the payroll tax in our earlier example. This is an added cost to the firm. So it is as if they're paying more for each worker. This will shift their demand curve down and to the left to D1 from D0. The difference between the demand curves are the cost of the coffee. So in this case, it's C. In this case, the wage that the firm pays will fall to W1 and the level of employment will fall to E1. Firms will want fewer workers because fewer are able to satisfy the wage equaling the marginal value of production condition at the new higher level of the wage plus the cost of the coffee. But if the workers like the coffee, they'll respond by increasing their willingness to work or shifting the supply curve to the right. So the figure on the left shows the case where the workers tend to value the coffee, but they don't value it as much as it costs the firms to buy it. So perhaps some of the employees like tea and some like brewing coffee at home. Maybe some don't like coffee at all. So in this case, the supply curve shifts to S1, which is less than how much the demand curve shifts. So it's not that full C. Maybe it's C minus 0.5, so it's half of it. So in this case, the employment will increase from E1, so it's not because they're receiving this benefit, workers will still like it, but not get all the way back to the initial equilibrium employment level at E0. It will go part of the way to E star. So the policy results in lower employment and lower wages. Now the wages are at W star instead of W0 because there's this other benefit, the coffee that they're getting. Now, if we look at panel B on the right, this shows the same thing, but in this case, the workers value the mandated benefit equal to its cost. So the supply curve here is going to shift such that the employment level stays the same. It still lies at employment level E0. Now, the wage being paid to the worker actually going into their paycheck is lower at W star instead of W0. the cost of the firm for each worker is W star plus C, and the value received by the workers is W star plus C, which is equal to the old wage. So now they're getting less money in their paycheck, but they're getting the benefit of that, in this case, the coffee, which is equal to how much money they're losing. So it ends up being the same, basically. So the government can either tax and create a program, or they can require firms to provide something. The tools of supply and demand allow us to compare the effect of both ways of achieving the same goal to see which is more efficient. So what we've seen from this analysis is that as long as the workers actually value the mandated benefit in some way, it will cause less disruption to require the firms to provide this benefit rather than instituting a payroll tax and having the government provide it. And there's some cases where, or some instances where this will be the case, where it's possible for the government and firms to both provide something. In this case, instead of the government providing it and funding it through a payroll tax, it'll be more efficient for them to mandate the benefit from the firms. So the firms are actually providing it. When there's a payroll tax, we only see demand shifts. In the real world, we don't place a tax on workers. So it's going to be the demand curve here on the panel on the right. Both mandated benefits, as long as workers actually value that benefit, there will be an increase in supply to account for at least some of the change. So it will not have the same distortionary effect.